Come, my brothers! Chanting and roars of the first batch containing humanity's legions echoed across the cylindrical vessel. 300 million sacrificial souls were part of this expedition for a chance to reach the end. Millions upon millions, contained within the confines of their last home, ready to die for the cause. The independent unilateral inserter began to approach its destination, the incomprehensible cavern of a higher being that dwarfed humanity's artificial vessel. Birthplace of the gods, harbinger of where it all began, valley of sacrifices. Many names were thrust upon their objective, yet, instead of fear, it only encouraged the Legion. The absolute moment the HSSIUI breached the outer walls, the leader raised his blade proudly. To arms! To arms! Brothers, charge! Instead of the normal method of disembarking, their vessel had fired the legions of humanity straight into the cavern of God. In spite of the holy name, the environment was anything but utopian. Being an imperceptible speck compared to the great living walls, the legions witnessed where others had failed. Corpses of countless races lay decimated across the inner walls. Everything from life forms that were small even to the humans, or towering behemoths that could step on hundreds of them at a time. All have fallen. All were absorbed by the cavern. The walls pulsated and glistened, slick, to the point where legions were practically swimming. Some had even drowned in crevices deeper than the imagination could comprehend. What began as a powerful charge to prove themselves slowly burned out. The way forward seemed endless. Some had even stopped where they were and accepted another fate. Some had allowed themselves to become one with the endless dark. It became fruitless to count the number of half-digested bodies the legions of millions came across. Counting the different races almost became meaningless after the third digit was breached. Yet, with how many failed, the Legion maintained a bleak form of cohesion. Those with hearts still went forward, in lieu of whatever existential dread ran down their spines. Only 150 million lives had remained to even experience despair. Among the darkness did the inhabitants of the New World come to light, gelatinous, of prodigious size, and all-encompassing. The ground itself was an entire other entity that had no proper form. A rumble echoed, and the vibration itself tore through the ranks by pure happenstance. It was possible that an eye had emerged from the sky to witness them, or perhaps it was just an illusion of mental degradation. Instead of despair, the legions had raised arms in celebration, for they now knew that madness had a tangible form to strike down. The leader did not need to command his men to attack, for it was impossible for them to miss. Even when thousands were crushed underneath appendages that couldn't be properly understood, thousands more returned fire with furious barrages and reckless abandon. The rumble that filled the air was replaced with the collective roar of the legions. The once irrepressible beasts of the New World were not being fought, they were butchered. Bodies that have withstood the might of hundreds of races were being whittled down piece by piece. Millions of humans have perished for even a drop of blood. Eventually, all went silent in the Red Sea. What remained of the Legion yelled out in their victory. Despite their numbers being dwindled to a mere 10,000 strong, they have proven themselves to be the lords upon the mountain of absolute death. Instead of falling into desperation, what remained of the Legion continued on forward while trampling on the beasts they had eviscerated. What was one continuous cavern finally divided into two pathways. Amongst the group, those who had placed their fate within one last roll of the dice had gone left. Meanwhile, those who maintained their primal instincts were beckoned to traverse the path on the right. The 10,000-man group had perfectly divided half and half, each one giving the other their blessings on achieving the betterment of their minuscule existence. Even for the 5,000 men who were called by their instincts, despite proving themselves and purchasing their right to defeat fate with blood, the cavern had another cruel twist. For what was once a grand hall slowly shrunk and convulsed. What was once a space designed for grand battles of epic scales, steadily reduced into a claustrophobic nightmare. Whether by poor luck or lack of strength, their numbers dwindled. Crushed by the flesh, or giving up their own lives to push more forward, the champions of champions were reduced to indescribable messes all the same. 1,000. Those were the numbers remaining once the walls began to halt their bone-crushing advance. The group were fully expecting fate to hand down its final judgment. On cue, one more fantastical being had emerged from the depths. What appeared as a ball interlaced within itself. The unusual specimen began to unfurl itself into a gigantic form. Before the entity could even finish its transformation, it was immediately assaulted by the remnants of humanity. Perhaps due to the audacity, or whoever remained were the absolute best as mandated by the heavens. They only got away with minimal casualties. 200 souls were left to carry the final vestiges of their creed. With spirits managing as high as conceivably achievable, they trudged forward. Yet again anticipating the worst that could occur, they moved as one unit, up until they had reached the chamber of the gods. Before the insignificant specks, there rose the treasure of ascension, an immense sphere, beautiful in the eyes of all of them in equal measure. They inherently knew since birth what must be done. One by one, each man attempted to breach the shell. Each time they failed. Instead of being crippled into depression, each failed hero stood by and awaited the true champion among them to be accepted. Even when the number of failures had grown, hope was not abandoned. Not today. Eventually one had broken through. His body began to become absorbed by the orb of enlightenment. No one was envious. No one maintained malice in their hearts. They all cheered and hugged one another. Tears flowed down and salutes were handed, for their mission was not in vain. To the individual chosen by God, he had smiled and closed his eyes. Nothing. Sometimes he understood the concept of sound. Sometimes he felt something akin to a heartbeat. His memories of his time before enlightenment began to fade. When he had believed that madness would settle in, he felt a new sensation. He witnessed light. Air caressed his skin. He could breathe. For the first time in ages, he heard someone's voice. "Ma'am, congratulations. It's a healthy human boy."